You need to spend time with the troops in the field doing the work. And I think you learn the most by being with the people who are doing the work in the trenches. And that's what I did. And it was interesting how if you just let your hair down and talk with people on the same level, it's amazing what you can learn. Stay grounded, stay humble, and get in there with the people who are really doing the work.
Welcome to the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and this is the place where we celebrate bold moves and big ideas. Each week, I sit down with inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a significant impact in their careers and in their communities. Whether you're looking to level up your leadership, pursue your passion, or just get inspired to take your next big leap, this is where those stories come to life. Now, if you're listening on iTunes, YouTube, or anywhere else you tune into podcasts, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in to what it means to truly go big.
Welcome to another episode of the Going Big podcast. Today, my guest, I'm so honored and pleased to have Joe Scarlett. Joe spent nearly 3 decades in leadership at Tractor Supply Company, much of that time as the president and chairman. He helped take what was at first a struggling small retailer into a Fortune 500 company. And today it has more than 2,500 stores and a commanding position as America's largest rural lifestyle retailer. But what's really interesting, as I think you're about to see, is that the product of Joe's leadership is his employee focus on culture. As a leader developing the company in that way, he not only helped grow Tractor Supply and make it so successful, but it has been studied and replicated at places far beyond the company itself today. Well, now Joe is the president of the Scarlett Family Foundation, and in that role, he focuses his continued interest in helping build great companies and individuals through leadership, also his investments in public policy. He writes and speaks out on this topic. Joe, I'm just so pleased to be reconnected with you and to have you today on the Going Big podcast.
Well, Kevin, it's been nice to get back with you again. I haven't seen you in several years, and I look forward to the podcast today. And I've listened to a couple of your podcasts recently. I've been very impressed with some of the people I've listened to. So let's go.
Well, I'm really glad that you're doing this. And to dig in, when you started at Tractor Supply many years ago, just give us a little perspective. What was the company like? What was the sort of history of the company before you got there? And what was it like in those very early days?
Well, just by way of history, the company was founded in 1938. And no matter what some of my buddies would say, I was not there. And the business was originally selling tractor parts to farmers, originally mail order business, but within the second year, they opened the first store. And it's really been a retail business since then. In those days, farmers would fix their own tractors, and when we were kids, we used to fix our own cars. So it was a pretty logical business. It grew during the 40s and the 50s. Company went public in the 1950s, and from what I understand, the stock did pretty well. And then in the 1960s, things began to slow down. The company got acquired by another company. And as time went forward, the number of farms in America has been declining for over a century, mostly through consolidation. And the complexity of running a tractor is much different than what it was in 1938. So that business was beginning to go away. The company went through a number of difficult times in the 60s and the 70s, and I joined the company in 1979.
Well, my understanding is you started in a personnel role, but you advanced ultimately quickly to number 2. Tell us a little bit about that part of the journey.
Well, I grew up working for a discount store chain in New Jersey, and I was in store operations there for 15 years and had a great career. But the last 2 years, they decided they wanted to put me in charge of personnel. And so I became the vice president of personnel for the company, which I didn't know anything about. And I got my nose bloodied a couple of times, but I learned how to do things. I learned how to sell my ideas. I learned how to empower people to do things without just giving orders. And it helped me grow up and become a better executive. And that became the stepping stone to get out of this troubled company and move into Tractor Supply.
Well, tell us about the turnaround phase then. What did you see, and what did you see that needed to change?
We were owned by a company out of Atlanta, a big conglomerate called Fuqua Industries. And I joined the company in 79. And by 1980, the end of 1980, it was pretty clear the company was losing money. And the fellow who hired me was an awfully nice guy. Well, but he got sidetracked and really didn't know what to do. And the parent company came in and said goodbye to him on December 1st, 1980. And in came one of their senior executives who was a good business guy, but he didn't have any retail background. His name was Tom Hennessy. And he became the interim CEO while they did a search for a new CEO. Well, I understood retailing, and I was kind of young and immature. And so he and I kind of worked together. I helped him understand retailing. He helped me grow up a little bit. And about 3 months later, he decided, he loved this business and he wanted to stay here. And he went back to the parent company. He said, hey, I want to run Tractor Supply, and put together a business plan. And the parent company said, okay, Tom, you're now the CEO. And he came back to Nashville and he sat down with me, not anybody else, just me. And he sat down, he laid out a table of organization. He said, Joe, here's how I'm going to run the company now that I'm the CEO. Tom Hennessy, I'm going to run operations, merchandising, and real estate. And I'm creating a new senior vice president over here in charge of everything else. And my immediate thought was, where are we going to find this dude? And he said, that's your job. Biggest surprise of my life. And it was a result of my helping him and pitching in with him and being on his team. And he just, from that, realized that I must be a pretty good guy, and wound up in a secondary role. And from that point, we began to move the company forward. Now, what did we do to begin to change things? Because we had been losing a lot of money. Well, Tom and I and several others in the executive role, we just spent lots of time in the stores, and we're out there talking to customers, talking to our employees, talking to our store managers, listening and observing, and we saw lots of things going on. Plus, we had a lot of data, so we could see exactly what we're selling, how much we're making on it, where it's selling. We had a lot of data, so we were very fortunate there. And it became pretty clear to us that farmers is the wrong customer. A lot of people in our stores buying stuff, but the amount of products we were selling that had to do with production agriculture was pretty small, probably 20% of the business or so. But there are other people in there, and they're buying animal feed and pet food and men's work clothing and riding lawnmowers and air compressors and generators and fencing and all these other products that had to do with a rural lifestyle, but didn't have to do with production agriculture. And we came up with this term hobby farmer as time went along. And we began to shift the business away from marketing to farmers to marketing to hobby farmers. And it was a very interesting dynamic. And over time, we understood what a hobby farmer is. Typically a full family unit, mother, father, children. They have an acre, or almost always more than 1 acre. They always have dogs and cats. They probably have some other animals. Or they may be raising some chickens, or they may have some goats or sheep or some horses. Maybe they typically have other animals. They probably drive a pickup truck. They're not involved in agriculture for a living. But this is their lifestyle. And, you and I going to go out for a steak dinner on Saturday night. Our target customer is more likely feeding his animals and fixing his fences. And it's just a different lifestyle. And we went marketing to that customer, and we went hell-bent for election in that direction. And it changed the dynamics of the company. It changed where we put new stores, and no more stores in the cornfields of Iowa. We put them in areas where there are lots of hobby farmers. It changed what hours we were open. No more closing on Sundays. No more closing at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It changed who we hired. It changed what we carried. It changed who we advertised to and how we advertised. It changed the dynamics of the business, and it put us on an entirely different path than we had been on previously. Now, that didn't happen overnight. That took place over years. But once we decided on this different customer and focused on that customer, it changed the dynamics of the business. And what's interesting is our competitors, and there were a lot of them in those days, they just looked the other way. They weren't paying attention. They would continue to focus on, what do I need to do to take care of my farmers? Because most of our competitors originally were farmers. And so we moved in a completely different direction. That's a long answer to a short question, but
no, that's great. I've got a couple of follow-ups, and I got to say, at that point, our family was right. You just described this. My dad grew up on a farm. My mother grew up on a farm, but at that point, my dad worked at the telephone company, and he was in management. But we had 10 acres out in the country. tractor that didn't need to till. I mean, it was, we had too much for the little bit of land we had. I raised a couple of beef steers, Black Angus steers every year, bought them in the spring, sold them in the fall. We were hobby farmers.
Perfect.
How did you identify, you came from this retail background. You touched on it a little bit, and you said at the beginning, agriculture had shifted. Farms had consolidated. People were moving out of agriculture. They couldn't fix their tractors in the way they could before. How did you, was it a combination of seeing it firsthand and visiting the stores and looking at the data? How did you see and spot the trend?
Well, it was all of those things, and we're very intense about it. I remember one situation where we brought about 15 of our best managers into a hotel in Chicago near the airport there, and we spent, I think, 3 days with them. And we said, let's talk about the business. What's going on here? And after a little while, we realized they didn't want to say the wrong things in front of us. And so we said, all right, wait a minute. We're taking notes, but we're not taking names. And we began to have this great conversation. They finally started opening up. And here's what the problem is. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. We should be doing this. And we just listened. And I just got a tremendous education, and some of my partners did too. We just got an education by listening to the people in the stores doing the business. And that's what put us on this different path.
You mentioned that Tom Hennessy, tapped you into this significant role. Once you fell into that role, how did you decide to allocate your time? I mean, how do you balance being in the office, being with the leadership team, and being out where the customers are and the first line of defense, so to speak?
It was partly from my previous background, but I just realized you need to spend time with the troops in the field doing the work. And I think you learn the most by being with the people who are doing the work in the trenches. And that's what I did. More than half of my work weeks went something like this. I left town on Monday. I took with me a regional manager responsible for 100 stores, occasionally some other promising individual from anywhere in the business. And we'd fly out on the company airplane and hook up with the district manager. Our company airplane is Southwest Airlines, by the way. and we'd have a nice dinner somewhere, inexpensive dinner, and then we'd be off the next morning. The district manager, the regional manager, and myself, and we'd spend 2 or 3 hours in 2 or 3 or 4 stores that day, and we do the same thing on Wednesday, the same thing on Thursday, and we would talk to every team member in each store. We'd walk the store with them independently, not as a big group, and it was interesting how if you just let your hair down and talk with people on the same level, it was amazing what you can learn. I'd say, well, Kevin, what part of the store do you take care of? You take care of the pet. Come on, let's take a walk through the pet section. How's this new dog food selling? And you come back to me and say, well, it's selling okay, but it's only in a 20-pound bag, and our customers got big dogs and they want bigger bags. That's just a little tiny example, but you listen to things like that over and over again, you learn. And in cases like that, the regional manager with me is taking notes, and then we get to the next store, and we'll ask the question of somebody in that store, and you do it over and over again, and you figure out, here's what we need to carry, here's what we don't need to carry, here's what's gumming up the works operationally, and just keep listening and going back and fixing and supporting. And it was always our goal that we want to help the stores be as successful as possible, because when the stores are successful, we're successful. So we just listen and listen and listen. Our job is to support the stores.
Well, my understanding of the history is in the early days, it wasn't easy. It was still pretty rough. And you couldn't always even pay some of your vendors on time. But my understanding is you just reached out and you just told them what the situation was. Tell us a little bit about that and how that ultimately helped build an element of trust with the partners that were so key to your long-term success.
Let me back up just a little bit here. At the end of 1981, the parent company came to us and put us up for sale. So we were for sale all of 1982. And at the end of 1982, we wound up putting together 5 of us, begged, borrowed, and stole everything we could, which wasn't much. And we partnered with 3 rich guys from New York City. And we bought the company December 28th, 1982, and in a traditional leverage buyout. And we had a great partnership with those 3 fellows, 2 of whom I'm still friends with today. And we just had a wonderful time. Now, interesting little side note here. those are also the folks who financed and ran the Woodstock Rock Festival. So, so our board meetings went for 2-3 hours, and we're beginning to make money then. And then we spend a half an hour listening to stories about Woodstock. That's how we got to that point. Now, our line of credit was only so big, and in our business, in the second quarter, the busiest time of the year, April, May, June, and you have to build up inventories for that point. And we were at a point where our borrowing, we didn't have enough capacity to borrow as much as we needed, and so we went to probably 20 of our key vendors, and we talked to them. We said, we need to put more goods in the stores, but we can't afford to pay you right away, or we can afford to pay half of it right away. We were just honest with them up front, and of all the I guess there were 20 or 25 of the big vendors we talked to, only one of them cut us off. Everybody else said, "Fine, we're going to ride with you." And we did that in 83, and we did it again in 84. But after that, our financial situation became so strong that was never another issue. But it was about being out there and just being honest with people, and they all except for one went with us.
Wow. Were there times during the turnaround where you questioned whether it was going to work?
There were some obstacles we ran into along the way that might have made you think twice about things. But I don't think any of us who were the five of us who wound up buying the company, I don't think any of us ever doubted that we would be successful. We stayed with it. We were at it, not 24/7, but pretty consistently. We all got along very well. We worked together very well, and we had open conversations about everything. There was no secrets. One of the things, talked about culture earlier, one of the things we talk about in the company is that we're a no secrets company. We want everybody to understand everything they possibly can, because the more our team members understand the business, the more they can help us all get to the best results. And so we put everything out there. We put everything on the table. We talk about the issues all the time.
Well, talk a little bit more about choosing partners. I mean, did you choose them deliberately and thoughtfully, or did you just kind of luck out by getting some really great people that you trusted and can work well with?
I think the latter is probably the better answer. We were just there, and some of the folks were sort of stepping up to the plate and doing more than you would expect them to do, and those were typically the folks that came in with us. We had two fellows who were merchants, and one fellow who was an operator. Another one who was good in marketing, and when we all worked together, and we had great business meetings, and we'd talk about things and sometimes argue about them, but we wound up collectively coming together as a unit. I credit my predecessor Tom Minnesy for that too, because he was mature and he helped us, some of us younger Turks, get things done together without getting too upset.
No, my understanding of the mission of Tractor Supply is work hard, have fun, and make money. How appropriate was that to making the company run so well?
Well, I have to give credit to my predecessor, Tom Hennessy. He talked all the time about we're going to do the right thing no matter what, and he would preach that kind of message continuously. And we had a mission and values a couple of different times along the way, and then in 1996 or 7, I think, the top 6 or 7 of us got together and we had a full week sort of knockdown, drag out discussion about where the company's going, what we believe in, and most of that was just solidifying the things we've already talked about and moving forward. But at that time, we also went through and rewrote our mission and values from previous time. We didn't change the meaning a whole lot. We just jazzed it up some and made it a little more easier to read. And one of those things was in creating those words for the mission: to work hard, have fun, and make money. And the work hard, everybody says that, and it's like motherhood and apple pie. And then have fun. Very few companies will say that in their mission statement. But we believe that's very important because nearly 90% of our people are customer facing, either in the stores or over the phone. And we want them to feel good about themselves. We want them to feel positive and deal with the customers in a positive way. We don't want a bunch of sourpusses in the stores. And so we talk about that, and we encourage that kind of thinking throughout the company, wherever we can have some fun doing something. When you go into the store, it's not uncommon to see the store manager, how are your sales yesterday? You hit some plan, everybody's getting ready about high fives. We have a very positive work environment. And the third part of that is to make money. Obviously, the company has to make money for everybody to survive. But what our company philosophy is and has been since 1981, we want to share a portion of everybody's contribution with them. So everybody in the company is on a performance-based incentive plan of one sort or another. And it's structured in a way that the more money is paid out, the better people like me are doing. Uh, an interesting example is every store has a business plan for the year, and they have a sales plan for every month. And when when the store hits the sales plan, we pay out a bonus to everybody in the store about 3 weeks later. And it's a proportional basis. There may be 20 people in the store. If you're 10% of the payroll, you get 10% of the bonus. But it's a team thing. So that if people are all working together, there's no point in me doing my thing and you doing your thing. If we do our thing together, because that's what produces the best results for the store. So we're very positive about that, and I think bonuses are an important part of the company's methodology.
All right, well, let's dig a little bit more into the point about culture. Peter Drucker famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Over the time when I've met many successful business leaders, there aren't that many who talk about the importance of culture, but those who do seem to be leading really successful companies, and they're very dedicated to that view. I'm going to ask you a question, though, that I often ask them, and that is, a lot of companies can just tack these values to the wall and say, this is what we do, but maybe not live up to them. What do you do when you have a high performer who doesn't fit the culture?
From a positive standpoint, we did not have that happen very frequently. It was very infrequent that happened, but we had at least 2 cases where people were just doing dishonest things, and we just, once we figured out what was happening, they were out. If they're doing things against the culture with the right intentions, we'll have a good coaching session with them, and if it repeats itself again, then we'll have to say goodbye. But we didn't have that happen very commonly. We have meetings consistently. We have big store managers meetings twice a year where we get everybody together, and every time we have those meetings, we will talk about leadership. We'll talk about the mission. We'll talk about the values. We'll tell success stories about people who have lived the mission and lived the values and done things that are really outstanding. So they're hearing a message all the time from leadership about the culture. We have the mission and the values plastered on the walls in the stores and in the offices and so on. And then somebody put up with the idea, let's put them on a card so we carry them in our pocket. So now there's a card that says the company values on one side, the mission on the other side, and we carry that with us. So it's not something that we talk about once in a while. It's something that if it's needed to be talked about, we got it sitting right in front of us. So it's become a way of life, is I guess the best way to put it. It's not any one thing we've done; it's what things we do consistently, and those of us in leadership roles always try to walk the high road in everything we do. And I think that if you talk to people in the company, you'd find that that's what really happens almost all the time.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't note this great book that you have. It's called The Culture Warrior. You threw me off with the title, but now I understand how you're talking about, and you do very effectively, the importance of developing the right culture. You say in here that a good leader pushes decisions down rather than holding on to power. I'm interested in that. And was there ever a time where you were reluctant to push that decision-making down or even regretted it?
No, and let me go back to a story that from my early life. When I was working for the discount store chain in New Jersey, I was in charge of the checkouts one night, and we're closing up at the end of the day, and I've got like 25 employees there, and we got to check out the cash drawers and put new paper bags out and sweep the floor and empty the trash and all the rest of this stuff. And I thought I had everything going for me, and so I said, well, I'll just pitch in and help put some of these bags in the checkouts, and I'm working my butt off and sweating, and about 7 or 8 minutes later, this big paw comes up from behind, grabs me and drags me back into the ladies' coat department. He said, "Joe, look down there. What do you see?" Well, there are three young guys sitting on checkout at the end and just sitting there talking to each other, having a good old time. And I'm busy working. And he explained to me that your job is not to do the work. Your job is to get everybody else doing the work. Or put a different way, he says, I want you to think of yourself as an orchestra leader. It's up to you to get all these different people playing all these instruments, or all these people doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it put me on a path of being a good delegator. And part of my success is that I've always been a good delegator. And in order to be a good delegator, you have to be a good teacher. So I worked very hard on coaching and teaching people. As a matter of fact, my badge, the company says head coach. It doesn't say president or CEO or anything like that. It's Joe Scarlett, head coach. And so we focused ourselves continuously on helping people do well. Now, I preached a lot about push decision-making as far down the ladder as you can, because if you're working for me and you're empowered to make a decision, you feel good about yourself, you develop your own confidence, and I have more time to think about other stuff. So I want you to understand how to do things. I want everybody to understand who's working for me, how to get what we believe in as a company, what the strategies are, where we're going, and just go about and execute. Just keep me in the loop, tell me what's going on, but don't think you have to turn around and say, "Hey, Joe, is it okay to do this?" Because I don't want to hear that. I want people to be able to make their own decisions. And when they do, they develop confidence. They're more independent. They take greater pride in what they're doing. It just is a very, very positive way to work. I tell you one other thing that people find amazing, but when I was the CEO, I made very few decisions. I delegated that process pretty much across the board. And I like to decide. I made big high-level personnel decisions along with the team, high-level strategic decisions along with the team. I also like to decide where we're going for lunch, but that was secondary to that. But I delegated as much as possible of the decision making, and it just helps people become better leaders.
Well, I think people find delegation difficult. I know I have over time. I mean, you worry about risk and you messing up and spending so much time teaching and explaining, and couldn't I just do it myself? My gosh. Any advice to those listening about how you have the confidence to do that?
Become a good teacher. Become a good teacher. Spend time with the people. The closer you get to the people, the more you can teach them. The more time you spend with them, the more they develop their own skills and their own confidence to do things. And then when people, another big part of our culture is we're very focused on telling success stories. So somebody working for me made a good decision, but I'll pat them on the back, make them feel good about it. Those kinds of things continue to build people's confidence about making decisions for themselves. When you tell success stories, everybody wins. Somebody gets recognition, other people learn, and the morale is very good. So that's an important part of the culture, and should be an important part of the culture in any company.
Mm. All right. Well, I want to learn a little bit more about you. And before Tractor Supply, you mentioned being in New Jersey. Did you grow up there? And what did you learn growing up, especially from your dad?
Yes, I grew up in New Jersey. Yeah, and,
and you moved to Nashville. How did they put up with that accent?
That's another experience. I was fortunate. My dad worked on Wall Street, and he managed money for wealthy individuals and for pension funds. And a little story I like to tell is he managed money for the longshoremen, which tells you two things about my dad. Number one, he's honest, and number two, he's competent. Because if he hadn't been either of those, he'd be wearing cement shoes in the Hudson River somewhere. But as a result of what he was doing, he would hear various CEOs speak to groups, various CFOs, and when he heard an interesting story, or often at the dinner table at night, he would say, let me tell you about such and such, or listen to so and so today, particularly as I was becoming a teenager. And it was both educational and it encouraged my interest in business. And he was still doing that. He was still doing that at 85 years old, something like that.
Well, you mentioned before Tractor Supply, you were at Two Guys, and in terms of sort of the personnel background, how did you learn the importance of dealing through persuasion rather than through authority. Because I think intuitively people step into it and think they just should lead by authority. And again, I'm talking about before Tractor Supply.
Well, at my two guys, I've been in operations and I had the authority to make decisions, and I was sort of a little headstrong and sometimes telling people what to do. When I got into a personnel role, all of a sudden now I have to convince vice presidents how to deal with their people. And you can't just go in and tell them what to do. You have to learn how to sell your ideas. And I got my nose bloodied several times, but it finally came around and turned into a good salesman of ideas and a good coach of executives and how to do things. A little interesting story I'd like to tell about two guys. That company had grown dramatically over the years, and then things went sour when one founder left, the other founder died, and we could see things going in a bad direction. And there was one fellow in senior management. We said, if he can only take over running the company, we'll get ourselves back on track. And then he left. And after that, a bunch of folks like me in middle management level jobs left. But interesting, the fellow who left was Bernie Marcus, who about 5 years later founded Home Depot.
Sure. Wow.
So we were riding the right horse. He just left the stables.
Was Tractor Supply ever a competitor with Home Depot, or is that a different market?
There are a few things we compete on. We compete on things like riding lawnmowers and snow blowers and some equipment like that. And there are a few other items, but generally speaking, we probably 20% of our goods will compete against them in one way or another. But we have, generally speaking, different customers.
Got it. Well, a number of the topics we're taking up where you had success, again, I think it's just counterintuitive for a lot of us, and you showed a better path. And I appreciate your thoughts about how to delegate and things like that. When you started succeeding, how do you keep from believing your own press releases? I've always known you to be very humble and self-deprecating guy. How do you steel yourself from thinking that you're actually better than other people?
Well, I've seen a lot of that happen with a lot of people over the years, young and not so young, and it's a matter of a number of different things. You just got to be realistic about yourself. You also, if you let it go to your head, you will see pretty soon people who used to talk to you no longer talk to you, or they tell you what you want to hear. You've got to self-discipline. You might also be helpful to have a spouse who's going to straighten your butt out when your head gets too big, which has happened to me several times. And it's a matter of self-discipline. But you can see when people's head gets too big about things, all of a sudden people don't talk to you, or they tell you what you want to hear. Well, then you're just distancing yourself from being an effective leader. When I was in the office, you wouldn't find me sitting at my desk much of the time. I would be around the building, and I'd be talking to people and just listening and talking, and you could pretty much figure out what's going on, and then you can help people in troubled areas. One of the fun things I used to do is when I'm walking around, I'd say, I want to introduce myself. I'm the vice president of rumors. And what's the latest rumor going around? Well, I'd usually come up with a laugh, but sometimes, wait, Joe, we heard that something was going on. And sometimes they got some secret information out ahead of time, or sometimes they're off base and they're getting confused. So you got to stay grounded. It's got to start up here, but you got to discipline yourself to do that, or you have to have other people around you who will straighten you out and not let you get off. If you begin to think too much of yourself, other people begin to ignore you.
Well, speaking of not taking you too seriously, you mentioned your wife, your spouse, you and Dorothy have been, you're a pair, and you've been nearly inseparable for more than 50 years. What did she do to help keep you better grounded?
Yeah, it's actually 56 years.
Congratulations.
I keep track of those dates. That's one way to stay in good. We just have always gotten along. We talk about things realistically. She's helped me in a number of situations and just thinking things out. And there was one case where with the possibility of the company being sold, and I didn't want that to happen. And she and I went out. We kept walking around in a circle for 2, 3, 4 hours, and she kept asking me questions. And finally, all of a sudden, I realized, wait a minute, here's a way out of this mess. We can go forward and wind up not winding up selling the company. And so there are things like that have happened over the years, but it's a matter of, in any marriage, you've got to be open and honest and talk about issues that are important.
Hmm.
And if your spouse understands what the company's all about, that's a big help. And Dorothy does.
Wow. Well, you got to a point, obviously, when you were not as focused on sales and growth and profitability, and you retired. You and Dorothy have now set your sights in Middle Tennessee on education. What's the problem that you saw that you all wanted to try to use some resources to address?
Dorothy grew up in England, and she was one of four kids, with two boys and two girls. Her parents were not very well off at all. They sent two boys to college, and the two girls didn't go to college, and so she never had that degree. And as we were thinking about how we're going to deal with some of the money we've accumulated, she said, "I want to help the kids that are falling through the cracks, like I did," and that's how we got started with scholarships. Originally, there were scholarships for business students, and now we do scholarships for STEM students. And we've gotten very involved with charter schools and helping charter schools do well. And we're doing a lot with college and career coaching, different organizations we're supporting in that area. And about 10 years ago, our daughter, Tara, took over running the foundation. And she's very engaged in the education world here in Middle Tennessee. And she got so involved in things in the community here. I like to say, 5 years ago, I was out somewhere with her and people would say, "Hey, Joe, is that your daughter?" And now I'm out with her and they go to Tara and they say, "Hey, Tara, is that your dad?" She's on a first name basis with the governor and the senators and everybody else. And I'm just an observer from the outside. But we are very, I think, very effective in helping the education world in Middle Tennessee. That's our homes. That's why we focused on doing that. And everything we do in the education space is all measurable. So if you give me a scholarship, we look at your grades. If we give you a grant to do something in a charter school, here's your plan. 6 months later, we're sitting in your lap. Have you done what you said you're going to do? And most, 90% of the time they're doing what they said they're going to do, and sometimes a lot more than they said they were going to do. But we measure all those things. We run it sort of like a business.
Well, some good lessons there. But, the Scarlett Family Foundation, started on scholarships, and a lot of people do that. But you decided to go ultimately much deeper. How did that happen? Why did you take that course? Were there some lessons that you learned along the way?
I'm not as involved in that day to day as I was in Tractor Supply. People were asking for help, and they asked for our help, and then we looked at what they were doing and went out and spent time with them and realized that this is something that can really make a difference. Scholarships are helping people after they've graduated high school. But getting through K through 12 education is equally as important, or maybe more important in many cases. And so we decided to invest equally in K through 12 as we do in college education. It just was a common sense thing to do. I wouldn't say there was any particular event that happened that pushed us in that direction.
Well, tell us about transition of leadership. I mean, you mentioned that Tara runs it now. How did you think about that? That's another challenging thing that we all face, whether it's passing along to family members, the next generation, or to whomever. How did you handle that?
Well, we had a fellow working for us who actually used to work for Tractor Supply. He's still working for us today, and he was running the foundation for us on a day in and day out basis. And he was at a point in life he knew that he wasn't going to work forever, and then Tara came along. She moved back to Nashville. She was recruited to come back to Nashville, and she got more involved in the foundation. She's always been on the board, and she just came to us one day and said, "I really would like to get much more involved in this," and we did, and she moved over there, and it was a very smooth transition, and she thinks. Both of our kids, but both in business, they both think like the way I've been talking about in terms of culture and dealing with other people, and they both are very effective in that, and they're both effective in how they get things done with other people.
Well, You've also chosen to be very active in public policy in Tennessee. That is such a polarizing area now. How do you think about that? I mean, you're trying to address removing the obstacles and barriers in society that are holding people back. How do you do it in a productive way? Any advice that you might have for those of us trying to figure out how to do this more effectively?
Well, I've been involved with the Beacon Center of Tennessee for about 20 years, and I'm the vice chairman there and have been. We have a wonderful fellow, Justin Owen, who runs that for us and has now for a long time. And we have an organization, and it involved in all sorts of different issues in the state. We were instrumental in repealing the death tax. We're instrumental in putting a constitutional amendment in that says the state can never put an income tax in place. And we've been involved in all sorts of regulatory issues and whatnot. And our people are very well respected in the state government. They listen to them, and we just continue to we listen. We poll the state several times a year, and understand what the issues are, and go about advocating for those issues. I'm not involved in on a day-to-day basis the way I was 15 years ago, because we got such good people doing the work that they go about doing it, and we get together periodically at these board meetings, and they tell us what's going on, and they're in there making things happen. In some cases, we're amazed at how fast things are coming together and how fast they're going. We're very fortunate to be in Tennessee, where we have a very, very solid fiscal government, and incidentally, we have I think the second lowest per capita debt in the country.
Well, we're losing a lot of Virginians to Tennessee. It's an attractive place. As somebody who grew up in New Jersey, are you a pretty big fan of Tennessee among all the 50?
Are you talking about football now?
No, I mean about the state itself and the business climate.
Yes. Okay. Often when people say Tennessee, they're talking about.
Of course, right? Yes.
I'm a big fan of Tennessee. Yes, I'm a big fan. I like virtually everything that goes on here in Tennessee. We need more roads. Everybody needs more roads. I think we're very solid here. It's a very red state, with the exception of Memphis and Nashville. But we get along and we talk to each other.
Yes, I agree with you. It's something I've observed there as well. And there's a lot of benefits to the culture of the South in that way, in the Midwest. Yeah. But yes. Well, I want to begin to wrap this up, Joe. You've obviously chosen now at this stage in your life to really speak out a lot on these issues related to business and leadership and building the right culture, not just on public policy issues and education, but on leadership. You've got a regular column, email, you've written in this book. Why are you doing this, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, before I forget, for those of you that are watching and listening, if you'd like to get my column, I do a leadership column once a month. Just go to joescarlett.com and sign up for it. No charge. Just come on your email.
We'll put that in the show notes too, so everybody can see it, joescarlett.com. But thank you, Joe.
I've back a little story first. As my buddies I know here in town, or anywhere, buddies who are my age who are retiring, I give them a little lecture on retirement. You got to do two things in retirement. One, you got to keep yourself healthy. You got to exercise. You got to eat the right food. You got to see the doctor. You got to take good care of yourself. And second, equally or maybe even more important, is you got to keep your mind active. You got to be doing things. You got get involved in the church or the Boy Scouts or whatever. You got to keep yourself active and doing things. So that's what I'm doing. I'm passionate about leadership. I did an awful lot of leadership teaching at Belmont University and then at Tractor Supply, and it's fun for me. I enjoy teaching and helping people do well. I do a lot of executive coaching today, and it's just fun to do. I write these columns and it's a way to keep my mind active. So I'm going to keep on going. I plan to live to be 120, by the way. So
well, that's great. Well, your column was what prompted me to reach out to you. Another one of them just caught my attention, and I felt like it was overdue to have you. You're just perfect for Going Big. The Going Big podcast, of course, is for people who've cast that big, bold vision, thought big, and gone big. And many people think that relates exclusively to business success. But the way you've described it, what do you think is meaningful and purposeful in your life as you think about going big in a contribution-oriented way?
I feel very good about helping people in all different sorts of ways. Some of it's philanthropic, but most of it's one-on-one or in groups and teaching. I speak at different organizations from time to time, and just I believe in helping people, and it just that motivates me to keep on trucking. Let's say, it keeps me moving in life, and it inspires me because I meet people all the time in all sorts of different walks of life, and that's another way that sort of propels me forward. Anybody can do it. You just got to decide to do that when you move on. If you've worked a career, don't just walk away from it. I like to say you can't sit on the couch eating potato chips and watching television. You got to be doing stuff. You got to be making things happen. And I look forward to doing. I look forward to doing things like this. This is I get a chance to chat about things that I think are important, that you think are important, that other people are going to listen to it and get something out of it. That makes today worthwhile. And
Amen.
Anything like that you can do to make life worthwhile for other people it's a personal reward, and it propels you forward.
Well, Joe, what if a 30-year-old young aspiring CEO walked into your office today? What advice would you give that person in terms of just a daily habit to try to get better about every day?
A couple of things. One is listening. Just really, really listen. Don't just pretend you're going to listen. When you work, get in with your people. You're a CEO or an executive. Get close to your people. Listen to them. Don't tell them what you think's right. Once you tell, if you got a group of people working for you, all of a sudden you say, "Oh, we're going to do this," and they're going to say, "Yes, boss," as opposed to saying, "Somebody's made a proposal to do such and such. What do you think?" And get everybody's input. And then, first of all, you'd probably make a better decision. Plus, everybody feels part of the game. Young people, don't let it go to your head. And I think that's very important. To just stay grounded, stay humble, and get in there with the people who are really doing the work. And keep your mind open too. Don't just because we've always done it this way doesn't make it the right way to do things. One of the things I used to preach is the old expression is, if it ain't broke, don't break it. Well, I like to say, if it ain't broke, let's break it and make it better, because everything in our business can be improved and made better. Not really everything, but most things can be. And if your attitude is, we're going to try to improve everything, that works well for the business. If you say, well, it ain't broke, then we just leave it alone, is a way to avoid potentially making improvements.
Well, a lot of good stuff today. Here's the concluding question, and it's a little bit like what you just said, but I think it's still bigger and deeper, and that is for anybody listening around the world, as they're trying to figure out their gifts that they've been given and how they can contribute. What kind of encouragement would you give them about continuing to think big in terms of how they can do things in life that would make things better for others?
Keep looking elsewhere. Don't just look into your own world. Look around to other places. In our world, in terms of thinking big, I was talking earlier about the amount of time I spend in the stores, which is an awful lot of time. But on those trips, we also would visit a competitor. We might go to a different kind of retail store. We always kept our mind open and looked at new ideas and what might be going on. Because if you keep a narrow focus on things, you'll stay narrowly focused. If you have a wider focus and you have curiosity, maybe that curiosity is the most important thing. But besides listening, if you're curious, you're going to learn a lot more.
Well,
so
that's the Joe Scarlett we know and love. Thank you very much for doing this today. It's great to be with you again, and thank you. Keep it up. I'll look forward to having you back in a few years just to have your latest and newest insights. But you've lived a life of great meaning, and we're all benefiting from it. Joe Scarlett, thanks for being on the Going Big podcast.
Kevin, thank you very much. It's been a nice conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling energized and ready to tackle your biggest goals. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps spread the word, and it gets these inspiring stories out to more people. You can also find more content, resources, and updates at our website, goingbigpodcast.com. Remember, the only limits are the ones you don't challenge, the limits that you impose on yourself. Keep pushing, keep growing, and above all, keep going big. See you next time on the Going Big Podcast.